You're welcome back. And I have let Venerable Gendun know that I'm going to share some of the information here. And of course, I think Venerable Gendun would, I'd like to.
There's still all kinds of people.
Oh, okay.
The dust is still settling down.
Yes, yes. I think for the next few minutes, I'm just gonna show them how to find information on our website. So this is Ocean of Compassion Buddhist Center website. And a few of you already asked me already, like, oh, how do we learn more from Venerable Gendun? Because of course, as you know, Venerable is touring currently, but will return to Europe soon, and he's teaching. He's based in Europe, I believe, the majority of the time. Although I know you're touring. So the best way to learn is to check out the IDMT or in-depth meditation training, which has recently been an official FPMT in-depth part of the FPMT in-depth curriculum. And then if you go to Ocean of Compassion website and you go to the program tab, so you can find out about in-depth meditation training here. And I won't go through all the details, but basically it's a multi-year training. Currently, Venerable is teaching year 3, but of course, it's not required. Of course, Ocean of Compassion just participate in this program as of September. So we've just joined in year 3. But I'm just showing you where to find out information for now, because there are plenty of information as you hear. So, of course, FAQ of who this for, is this good, appropriate for me? Do I have enough knowledge to learn? And I'll ask Venerable Gendun to talk about it in a minute. And then there's a few videos as well that you can check out. And these are not the teaching per se, I believe. It's more of an overview of the program. Okay. And then to sign up, let's say you decided, oh, this is right for me. You come back to the homepage and then you go to Saturday, because Venerable Gendun is teaching this weekly. And this is the time that it falls into our time zone, 6:30 to 9 a.m. So he just taught one this morning. And I was just telling a friend here that, oh, it's so early. But it kind of works because the first hour is meditation. So you can just wake up and meditate, right? And then the topic is Radiant Ground, Emptiness, and Buddha Nature. So if you sign up, of course, a lot of FPMT centers are participating. So you're welcome to sign up at any center. Of course, we'll love if you sign up at our center. So this is the term. We're right now at term 1. Of course, we're somewhat under one, maybe halfway, more than halfway. But if you sign up, let's see. Right now we close the individual class, so it's going to be a full course, but you will have access to the teaching, the recording, so you can watch later. And what's going to happen is when you sign up, you will get login information to the Buddha Project. And I'm going to click it here so you know that all of the information is actually, the course material is hosted by the Buddha Project, which is the nonprofit organization that is founded by Venerable Gendun. And you will need to have a login information to get there. But here, of course, there are many centers here that participate, and there are many other teachings and Venerable is teaching as well. So here you're looking at in-depth meditation training. So I welcome you to check out this is a nonprofit organization. You can learn, donate, and find out more information from there. So I'll stop sharing here, and I'll invite Venerable Gendun to perhaps talk a little bit more about IDMT and the Buddha Project in general.
Yes, to be succinct, that we can go back to meditation. On the one hand, there is plentiful of offerings on regarding introductory level meditation, and I found there's very little what to do with all the other more advanced stuff that we study, and that is not only true for Tibetan Buddhism. That is true almost the entire span of Buddhist traditions in the West. You know, whether or not you do Theravada, you will very rarely encounter retreats or platforms in which you learn how to use the Abhidhamma to meditate. And so there's this enormous wealth of more advanced stuff, technology around that we rarely deploy. And there's two more things that I thought were important. That on the other hand, you know, when with scholastic studies, you can have a distinct curriculum. You know, you can say, well, we do this, and then we do that, and then we do such and so on and so forth. But for meditation, this is less appropriate. Then people really develop differently. You can say, well, if you study this topic and you make a bit of an effort, we can all come more or less to the same understanding. But that you can't say for meditation. That is not the way that works. People develop very differently in that context. And so, on the one hand, for those that have already been present, they know that, but the program, the training really unfolds with the students. And so I have, on the basis of the questions being asked, of what I see happening in front of me on the Zoom screen, I have some idea of what is happening with them. And so I adapt the pace and the content on the basis of where they are and how they are developing. And that, I think, for a meditation program or training is very important. I also realized that, I know from personal experience that the distance between theory and the actual practice is quite large. So to know one thing, even something as simple as mindfulness, there's so much to be said about that. There's such a complex mental factor that performs so many different tasks. When you have to figure out that on your own, then that's not useful. And so, on the one hand, the training is really an applied training to meditation. So we use the theory, we use everything of this tradition, but only in a way as it is applicable to meditative practice. And so all the excess theory that explains things where we are left behind. And thirdly is that if you are in the training, you will have my email address and my WhatsApp number, and you are invited to ask questions about where you are and what is happening to you. On the one hand, because personal advice matters. On the other hand, because a meditator also needs to be safe. If you don't trust what your mind is doing, you can't move on. And sometimes there might be reasons why you should not move on, and it's helpful when someone can point out to you, like, okay, this is the point where you should stop and adapt in a certain way. On the other hand, there are parts of meditative practice that are really, really challenging, but where the challenges are quite okay if someone is robust enough. Yeah? And so don't then to have the affirmation like, what you're doing is good, it will work out well, don't worry about it, go on like this is also very necessary. And so on the one hand, this is a 4-year training, although the years can be done more or less individually if you have a background in Buddhist practice. Otherwise, there will be a lot of theory there that is, although I do retell many things to make them make sense in a meditative context, at the same time, when you have no background, then it becomes challenging. And it is, again, it is a training. So the individual year, the years can be done individually, but then how the years exactly unfold is done always together with the students rather than me having a preconceived idea. Last year, I think we managed to finish about half the text that I had collected. I had very different ideas, but it would make much more sense when we were doing it to highlight Vasubandhu's 20, 30 verses, for example, and to remain there, than to do all the text. And so that's both, I think, for the participants and for myself, it's a much more pleasant way of working. Like, well, let's see where we can go and how we exactly go there. And then to have access, in this case, to me, to have a meditation teacher as your point of reference is very useful in your practice, that you can be sure that you develop in a healthy manner and do not run into problems. In many ways, meditation is like top sports. And like with top sport, there's also things that can go wrong. And so it is when you want to do marathon running, it's good to have a trainer that can tell you whether or not your needs are reliable or that you should do something about them. And that is not very differently for meditation. And so the idea is to, so on the one hand, to create like a supportive environment where people can develop in a healthy manner in the pace that they can do that. That's maybe also one thing to add, is that you can do this training in any way that you want. I still have people in year one. They just do have either less time or want to spend more time. Like there's even a number of Theravadins still in there. They just are enjoying the depth of the first year and have no inclination to go beyond the first year and just keep working on the first year, which is entirely fine. If the second year is of more interest to you and you want to hang in there for a few years, that's also entirely fine. Whatever you want, whatever meets your needs in that sense. The backdrop is actually something else, and I think Rinpoche is both a good trailblazer in that, as well as a good advisor, that many aspects of the path are challenging. But what is truly feasible in this life is to achieve bodhicitta. And I was quite nicely surprised that last week there was a podcast posted on the Wisdom Experience website with Alan Wallace, and his teacher had said exactly the same thing. Like if you're not working on bodhicitta, what on earth are you doing with your life? It is doable. It's really doable. And so in a way, we focus every year starts with a whole period on practicing shamatha from different perspectives. And so this year, actually I had to give like a summary of what we had been looking at before. So the combination of Theravada technology and Mahayana, Asanga one. Next year, we will look at the same thing again within the context of Mahāmudrā. Then we spend some time on generating motivation. The first year, renunciation or definite emergence, the wish to get out of samsara, or self-compassion, one could say, although the word self in the word self-compassion is highly problematic. Yeah. And then the other years are all focused on generating the wish to become a Buddha for the welfare of all living beings. That is where we are at the moment. And then we head into insight meditation. Because in our tradition, insight and compassion are mutually reinforcing. So the final point of the training is to endlessly run. And I will explain the same thing. Well, I will use the same basis to explain all kinds of different things over every cycle of 4 years. After the first year, I thought, oh, there's so much that I didn't say. Like I can think of years of things to say about year one. And so there's also something to look forward to. So it's not that at the end of 4 years, you get like a certificate, no certificate. Yeah, when you become enlightened, I'm very happy to get your certificate. But apart from that, it's not the point. The point is to have a platform, a context in which you can keep meditating. And that order, I also find very useful myself. Many meditators work in that way, to move endlessly back and forth between different perspectives, because they become all mutually reinforcing over time. And so to circle through all these methodologies is actually makes the mind extremely malleable. Yeah. And so like the first year, we focus this time on the breath and so on and so forth. Next time we do that, we might use the 4 elements. And there's so much, third time around, we might just focus on feeling and so on and so forth. So there's so many different ways in which you can approach every one of these years, and we will do so. So to have a nourishing community in which you can practice for as long as it takes, and to find support in that, that is the whole purpose of this thing. Yeah. Does that leave any questions?
So if somebody decides to stay in year 1, you will still, even if you in year 3, you still support them and answer questions. And wow, you must be very busy, Venerable. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm very good at time management.
Oh, well, there you go then. Thank you.
Actually, someone keeps pulling my leg if I will be willing to develop a training in my time management, and I'm very resistant to doing that. There's maybe one thing to add, but these are future developments. We are currently building a new website, again, for different reasons. From September next year onwards, we'll add a training in Lamrim and Gendun practices before it. That's what the common and uncommon preliminary practices. In time, but I need to find out how I'm doing that. I want to hold everything in the Lama Tsongkhapa. Lama Tsongkhapa will become the dominant theme of the whole section of trainings. And by the time I'm done teaching a basic program next year, I will also start to record a library, because the levels of understanding within the group are highly varied. And so I will take many of the basic program topics and some additional topics, and then strip them of everything that is not of an immediate meditator's interest, and record commentaries on these things. I will probably start with like an extensive commentary on the way mind and mental factors can be deployed, or what they are, and how to deploy them in meditation, so that future people that join this training that have a lack of understanding of the mind and mental factors can have free access to these additional library elements and figure out what that actually means, like a whole set of teachings on Buddha nature and so on and so forth. So that is all coming in time. Yeah, if I find time to make it, I will. But yeah, I do need to sleep sometimes still, which is extremely unfortunate. I know, Rinpoche, but here we are. I do my best, but not yet. Yeah, but it gives you some sense of where this is going. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Much to be said, but still, but let's leave it here. I didn't ask. No questions on Zoom. No, good. Oh, that thing. Yeah. Well, Well, on the one hand, the Buddha project is actually just me with some assistance. And I am not I'm not very fond of self-promotion. That really does not fit what I'm trying, what my life is all about. To promote the self is, yeah, that's really unfortunate. And so I'd rather promote a project. The term comes actually, the term comes from, yeah, how to say this? I stole something from Yangshi Rinpoche, and then I made it into something else, and that became a joke. And that is that at one point I joked, like, if teaching theory would be enough, then I would found a Buddha factory. Then I would just invite a group, I would teach them the Four Noble Truths, they would become enlightened, and I move them out, and I would move the next group in. And it was just a joke like, please don't mistake intellectual understanding for insight. These are very different things. One is necessary for the other, but they are definitely distinct things. And so that then grew into this idea, like, I don't need self-promotion, I need the promotion of you and what we do together. And so that is what the idea of the Buddha project came all about. Moreover, I wanted to think, I mean, my mind is a fantastic chess player, but then on 24 boards at the same time. So one of the things that I wanted to do is to play with new ideas about organizations. I function within different context organizations, and I find that is one of the struggles of my life in a way that organizations over-focus on themselves. And that conversation actually started with the Mind and Life organization, which has a major publicity problem. They can't get out. So there's a little group of people that are familiar, some PhD students that are familiar with this little club, but that's it. You know, when you see them on LinkedIn, whenever they post, they get 1.5 like. And so they can't get out. And I said, you know, that one of the problems that you have is that you over-focus on you. While many of the participants in that organization all have their own projects. They all do magnificent things. I said, so, well, why instead of over-focusing on oneself, do you not focus on the connections that you have? And to make that as a social contract, like I will highlight you and then you highlight me. That is a mutually beneficiary supposition. And so initially the idea was also for the Buddha project to be a nexus between the FPMT and other things. It's just to promote the FPMT, but by the natural collaboration that I have with a multitude of other organizations. So when I do things for Mind and Life, they find my website. And for my website, they find the FPMT, and so on and so forth. So to think about what I call hollow organizations or interconnectedness organizations. Not much on the inside, but lots of connections. So I had to build a favorable circumstance for all those involved. Yeah. Something like this. Yeah. And then 20 other boards. Yeah. It's a good way of, and that maybe is my personal thing. It's helpful for each of us to, on the one hand, have a space in which we can think. And maybe that I also stole from like great organizations like Google. Now, what does Google do? Google gives people space to develop things. And when they work, they market them. Yeah. And I think that is a very healthy way to think. Actually, we saw yesterday the same thing about IBM. There's a beautiful story about IBM there. One of the innovative things about IBM was that they did not have strictures on workers, what they were actually supposed to be doing. They got an enormous amount of freedom to figure out for themselves where this was going. And then some people on top were then sort of overlooking all the developments and then picking from that what made sense as a package towards their clients. I think that is a healthy way of working. And it allows people, in this case myself, also to take ownership of some of the things that we are doing, which is really empowering as well, also for Dharma teachers. Yeah. On the other hand, and that is the final thing, is that I do believe that we are all living in the world. Me as a monastic and you as lay, but we have rather similar circumstances. I'm not living in a jungle either. And so a healthy development meditatively would be to match one's practice of compassion with also activities in the world. We also need to make a difference out there. If we're all going to do that on our own, we don't do much. Now, for our own $25, the effectiveness is not very great. And so part of the donations that the Buddha Project receives from the participating centers is used for maintaining the website and building materials and so on and so forth. But for example, it was also used to furbish a nunnery of Bhikkhuni Dhammananda in Thailand with a new roof. That is what we did together. I could not have paid for that on my own. None of us could have done that but together we made some important merit. We did something for female monastics, in this case in the Theravada tradition. So we did both something for female monastics and something ecumenical as well. Yeah, and they can study in a dry place. And I think equally that is very important to come together and to do some innovative things. Yeah. Hmm? Yeah, that's also, yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Well, we'll start to focus a bit more on the contemplative side. I've decided, yeah. Anyway, that's too much beyond today. Yeah. moving back and forth. No, please. No, it's reminded me of something. When I was 17, I did a first year of a teacher course. And then you were sent to high school. I mean, so you were barely out of high school and you were teaching high school. I remember standing in front of the class, and there was like a sheet of paper with the names of the students. And I realized that the person sitting in the right side in front of me had a male name. It was a girl. So I realized that probably they were all sitting in different places than my list had, which of course is a typical thing to do when you have a replacement teacher, which is very embarrassing when you've just left high school yourself. Yeah, that's why I see you moving around like just to confuse me. Now, and I guess in the Prajnaparamita Sutta, the Buddha says a famous sentence that plays a major role in all Mahayana traditions, especially this one. And where he says the best seeing or the perfect seeing, depending on how you translate it, is the non-seeing. And the question is why? What does that mean? Yeah. Because that's an important question. Yeah. And that is related to an enormous broad topic, and that is, there's a beautiful Sanskrit word for that, and those in the in-depth meditation training, I will hit you with that word next year a lot. It is amanasikara. Yeah. It literally means not paying attention. It has extensive meaning. It will obtain great meaning in the context of Mahāmudrā. But what that means is that we have the freedom not to pay attention to something. And the deluded mind doesn't have that. When a desired object appears in your field of view, you get stuck. The mind is very sticky. Yeah? Or when something appears to you that the mind portrays as dislikable, it gets stuck on it. Yeah. And as the analogy that I used this morning, like imagine that you're sitting in the street and then someone really strange walks by, and try not to look at that person. That is very hard to do. Yeah. And so, which also plays a major role for monastic. It is surprising how much our eyes are biologically driven to look at certain things. And I will not elaborate on that, but you can imagine that is quite a challenge when you become ordained. You all of a sudden find out that your eyes are going where they are not supposed to be going, and it's very hard to control them. They don't do that because you want it. They do that because they're conditioned to do so. There's all kinds of things that stick out in your field of view that have a hold on your attention. That is exactly what monastic vows are all about. And so in the broadest possible sense, one could say that that is an unacceptable situation. The only way that our mind makes sense of it is to come up afterwards with the idea that this is really what you wanted. And that is where it becomes very problematic, because that moment it becomes intertwined with our identity. And I don't have to tell you when you walk outside how problematic that in our world has become. And so what as practitioners we want is to be able to not pay attention to those things that are harmful to us, that are portrayed by our mind in harmful ways. We would like to be able to freely divert our attention if we need to. Yeah. And that is why I highlight always at the beginning of meditation the deployment of equanimity, actually, to actively learn to let go. That is a way of looking at the world that the moment you do it allows you already a measure of freedom to navigate your attention. Yeah. So that first highlights that to be aware on the basis of your own experience that your awarenesses are highly biased, and that you have the freedom to reinterpret that. So when you can deliberately look at these things in a different way. Yeah. And often it actually suffices just to look a little bit longer, to be honest. Yeah. That already is very helpful. And to notice that the moment you do that, the mind becomes free floating. Yeah. that pulling at it, at least temporarily, stops. So that's a very good tool to learn to use. Otherwise, it's very difficult to go inside. Now, highlight the same thing that is true with regard to our body and mind. We also observe these as highly biased, highly judgmental. And this approach is not a good way to calm the body and the mind. I hope that you saw for yourself that when you do rather the opposite, when you look equanimously and mindfully at the mind, it comes by itself. Actually, it's a trick that I very early on learned in my own meditative practice, where one of my teachers said, you know, if you were ever sitting and your mind doesn't want to stop talking, then you should say it to your mind like, I hear you. I will stop meditating. I will be here fully present, and you talk to me. I will listen to you. And the moment you do that, of course, your mind doesn't do anything at all anymore. It's completely, utterly silent. There's nothing happening from that side. It's a little trick simply to realize that the moment you mindfully and equanimously observe the mind, it comes by itself. There's nothing to do. You don't need to fight all the time. So the meditation is not about doing, about forcing yourself away from your distractions and so on and so forth. It's a way of looking at your distractions. And so when in the moment when we look at the nature of the mind, try to hold it simply mindfully and equanimously. As long as you can do that, distractions have no way of pulling you away. There's one extra thing to it to keep it a bit simple, is to inevitably the head distractions don't only arise because always of negative karma and so on, they also arise simply on the basis of habit. Our mind has a habit of creating this constant barrage of thought, and you will be with that for a while. So even if you are mindful and equanimous for a while, you will have things sort of racing into your view of awareness. What to do then to make a very complex story as succinct and simple as possible is to notice the difference. So when the mind is mindfully focused on the mind itself, then it is pervaded by a form of well-being. There's openness, it's relaxed, it's pleasant, all these aspects. And the moment a thought barges in, that whole pleasantness collapses immediately. You get sucked into something that is actually not that nice at all. And so to learn to see the difference, because to see the difference is enough. It's enough. Yeah. And when you train that, at one point it becomes so enough that even when the mind starts to incline in that direction, it also immediately jumps back by itself. That's where meditation becomes quite fun, where you can see the mind doing things and then realizing what it is doing and correcting the whole thing quite on its own. And you have nothing to do but just to sit back and observe the show. Yeah, that's where you really would like to go. Yeah. Does that make sense? Anyway, there's much detail behind it, but we just have to learn to discern what is unskillful, unfortunate, unwholesome for our mind and what is not. So what the Buddha means with the non-seeing is not seeing that which is unwholesome, which is fabricated by the mind, but in a way that is unwholesome to our well-being. That is what we would like to get rid of to begin with. And towards the end, we will see there's a few things. Yeah, a few deep things included there. Yeah? On Zoom? Great. Yeah. So let's go back to a comfortable position. And so now you know that this is more a question of looking than doing. We may invite the presence of the Buddha among us. So its sheer presence helps us already in letting go. We might take a moment to observe the content of our senses, our body awareness, our mind awareness. And setting all things free of our judgment, our aversion, our desire and attachment. Until the tension becomes well grounded, but also free floating, at least for a moment. So that we can attend to one experience after another, coming and going. Then we may explore that this experience, that every experience, has two interrelated but distinct components. On the one hand, the appearance of an object, a thought, or a feeling. And on the other hand, awareness, mind. mind that is clear and knowing. Lacking all manifest characteristics, it clearly represents any aspect of the world. And it knows what it represents. That absence of manifest characteristics is like a space beyond space. Is silence beyond silence. Yet flowing like a river, new in every moment. Knowing stillness flowing. There's different ways to deepen your experience of the clear, knowing mind once you are focusing on it. Some prefer to use that experience, that the coming and going of an object gives a sense of the mind's spaciousness. Some prefer to look at the stillness between two thoughts. Or you can do it by focusing on where thoughts come from or where they go to. And they arise from and disappear into the clear aspect of the mind. When a distraction nevertheless arises, on the one hand, you can use that distraction, like that sound in the cathedral, to deepen your awareness with a clearer knowing mind. And a clear contrast between distraction and clearness. To seek to return to the mind's stillness. Whenever you find the sense of the clear, knowing mind, hold it therefore gently. And then within the holding of the clear, knowing mind, you're quite free to explore what it is. What do you see when you look at it? And we can slowly rise from this meditation. Or not. A few pointers here. I highlighted that even the practice of shamatha, it is important to notice when you are not seeing the hindrances. That is what they are called. You want to rejoice in their absence and keep them there. Yeah. That is often, that is in the sutras and in the ornamental clearization expressed in what is called the 4 correct exertions. These are very important practices in shamatha, which highlights that shamatha, in contrast to what most Westerners think, is not a practice of not thinking anything at all. It is actually a very active engagement. And so you observe one object or another, in this case, the nature of the mind, and when the hindrances are absent, and I just left it here in a general sense, that which disturbs the mind, and you know that they are not there. You keep your eye out on them staying that way. As you know, they're not here. And this is what it feels like when they're not here. That experience you need. That is the only way to do that, because it is also when you can explore the absence of these hindrances in your mind, you also start to notice how that feels. That feeling is called piti. And one of the ways to look at the development of calm abiding is by way of the felt sense. In the beginning, it's very gentle and intermittent, but at one point it can be so strong that it feels like waves of happiness descend upon you. And so it really grows. It is one of the initial direction indicators. And that is why this exertion comes in as a very important tool. Because on the one hand, it allows you to see that something is not there. And that opens the door then to investigate the other side. What is there still? Yeah. And in this case, in the context of the practice of shamatha, the absences are absent. The hindrances are absent. And with that, the mind starts to show other aspects, which are called often the branches of concentration. And that is, we'll leave it a bit to the side. The most important of them is that felt sense, piti and sukha in Sanskrit. And so to learn to distinguish. And on the other hand, when distraction comes in, you get distracted. You will find, first of all, that when you're distracted, you get sucked into a simulation. You don't know that you're distracted at all. But the moment you come out, there can be a quick moment of reflecting back on it. Like, how was that? You know that the beautiful qualities of a concentrated mind were absent and other things were definitely present. And to know, how did that feel? What was that? And that analysis helps you to gradually move from one state of mind to the other state of mind. So it's less of a doing, but more of an analysis of an active seeing of what is going on. Yeah. And so, again, the 4 correct exertions is to know when the hindrances are absent or when they are present, so that when they are absent, you make sure that they stay absent, and when they are present, you diminish them. On the other hand, when the wholesome factors are present, then you strengthen them by noticing them, for example. And on the other hand, when they're absent, you want to bring them back. So that requires quite a bit of engagement. And in reality, despite what we tend to believe, it does not disturb our practice. In fact, it sucks us in. It gives enough activity to stay in there. If you just stare at whatever you have as an object, the mind actually is like entering the atmosphere with a capsule. And so if the inclination is too shallow, you actually just bounce off. And that is what many people experience when they want to try to meditate. You want to go to the object and you immediately ricochet off of the object is too slippery. Yeah. And so to make it less slippery, you need an active engagement with the object. This will make the object, that is the other thing that we did, of course, is to analyze a little bit what is the clearer knowing mind. It makes the object more detailed, so there's much more to hold on to. Gives you like the difference between a bar of soap and, like, say, this piece of cloth. The bar of soap just keeps escaping from you. But this cloth is rough enough, is detailed enough for me to hold on to it. Yeah. And on the other hand, that investigation in the presence or absence of respectively hindrances and the more beautiful aspects of the mind, let's leave it at this form of mental happiness. Does it make sense? Yeah. So that's the first highlight into non-seeing. What you really want is a space where you are actively aware of the non-seeing of hindrances. Such things as aversion, desire, distraction, sloth, torpor, and spiritual doubts, to give you the list for those that really want lists. And you know the joke by now, but Christians love God, Buddhists love lists. Definitions, etymologies, and further lists. Yeah. So the next two exercises, we go a little bit further. And that has to do with certain appearances. And this will both be with regard to the appearance of the self. When we do that, the first thing that we need to say, and that is very importantly, that we're not trying to negate the self. But that makes for very difficult talking. So I usually distinguish between the person and the self. Basically, twice the same word, but I use the person for that which does exist and the self for which does not exist. Yeah. That is a good way of looking at it. And so, for those of you that were here earlier this week, we took as an example a car. So you believe that that you use the name car for the self of the car. Yeah, like there is already a self of the car, and you call it car. But when we analyzed and we looked a little bit deeper, we saw that we could only find parts, and none of the parts are car. And outside of the parts of the car, we could not find anything at all. That doesn't mean that the car doesn't exist. It means that the way the car appears to us is really unfortunate. It's not realistic, and that unrealistic aspect causes us to either desire that car, if it is your favorite car, or if it is that ugly beast of a Tesla that is parked here, then it does not want it. Yeah, if it is still parked there. It's the first time I saw it close up, and I was not impressed. I hope I don't insult anyone. I hope it's not your car. But anyway, I don't need to drive with it. So if it is your car, enjoy it. But anyway, so it is the way it appears to you is that the car seems to self-exist. And it is on the basis of that appearance that dislike or like is, or indifference grows. Yeah. As though it has something from its own side. The car has a self of a car. It has carness to it, rather than seeing that every aspect of the car arises in dependence on things that are not the car. That's parts, and we will see in a moment, there's also causes and conditions. Cars without either electricity or gasoline don't make much sense either, or garages or car factories, and so on and so forth. So one could say, as I played out earlier, you could say that the car exists sort of halfway between its parts and its causes and conditions. But then, of course, in this context of Mahāmudrā, there's one more dependency involved, and that is labeling. A car is only a car for people that drive cars. For people from a culture that do not drive cars, we will never know what they see, but I can guarantee you they do not see a car. The bird that flies over does not see a car. The fly that circumambulates it thinks it's a holy Tesla, does not see a car. Who knows what it sees? And so objects are objects for the observer. Yeah. That is the way things really exist. Things do exist, but do not self-exist. Things exist dependently. But what we want is not to see that image of self-existence because it holds sway over our awareness. The moment that appears, we get lost. And that is specifically with regard to the I. The moment we think the I self-exists, the mind really loses the whole plot. Yeah. So we're going to try to do a meditation, once in analytical meditation and once in Mahāmudrā, is to not look at the self, to not have the self appear. First, we're doing some analysis, making it appear, and then in Mahāmudrā, we will look through it. Yeah, that is the way we're going to approach it. Let me see. Shall we do a break first, or shall we do a break after? First. Okay. Here there was a democratic decision to do the break first, I think. Yeah, you had no say. I'm sorry, me neither. So, but on my side, there was the promise of coffee in the break. So I am going to see what happens. So let's take a 15-minute break, and then we do the two other things in a consecutive order. Yeah?